Here we are again, and with me I have Stephanie Marie Fox. She's with Foxy Trot. What is that?
Foxy Trot Dance.
Yeah, what is that?
That's my company, Foxy Trot
let's
Dance.
talk about that just briefly. What is that?
Foxy Trot Dance is a community-based dance program and also storytelling. I believe that vitamin M is the best way to improve our health and wellness, both personally and community, and I think that we're all a little deficient in music, movement, and meaningful connections.
Well, isn't that, you got it, right? You got it all. So, but right now we're going to be talking about the Iroquois Nation, or the Iroquois traditions, and the Haudenosaunee. Is that like a tribe? How would you, because you've got the Wampum Belt here that we're going to talk about with the 5 nations, and tell us how that all goes together.
The Native Americans of upstate New York refer to themselves as Haudenosaunee.
Oh.
And the term Haudenosaunee,
trouble saying that.
the term Haudenosaunee means people of the Longhouse.
Okay.
It stands for the traditional type of housing that they lived in, because upstate New York was not TP people, as you see on the westerns.
Well,
And
they needed probably something more substantial, maybe.
the Longhouse was matrilineal and matrilocal. So it was a building that was, everyone would be related to the oldest woman, all of her daughters, all of their sisters, all of their children. And when
So it was matriarchal in that sense.
not matriarchal. Matriarchal has to do with power.
Okay.
Matrilocal, meaning living where the mother lives. So when the husband was getting married, when the son was getting married, he would go and move with his mother. So matrilocal. And matrilineal, meaning you trace your heritage to your mother's line.
Right.
So rather than taking your father's last name, as a lot of Americans do, your nation and your
I'm
clan.
opposed to that one, so anyways, I think we should just keep our own names.
Well, your nation and your clan would come from your mother's side of the family. So you would trace your lineage to your mother, that's matrilineal, and you would live with your mother's family, that's matrilocal.
Okay.
They refer to
Wonderful
themselves as
terms,
Haudenosaunee. The terms Iroquois comes from Iroquois, that's a term imposed by the French, and then 6 nations or 5 nations originally is what they were called by the British. But
The 5 nations, yeah.
The 5 nations originally, and
But
then the
there's
Tuscaroras will
Tuscaroras
join.
came in, yeah.
And then the Haudenosaunee Confederacy will consist of 6 nations: Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and then later the Tuscarora join, and that's 6.
Do they still teach that? Because when I went to school, we had to learn all of the nations and of the Mohawks in New York State. And I don't know if they still teach that, but I hope they do.
4th grade is New York State history.
Okay.
So that's when you're going to see the tendency to talk about the Haudenosaunee, talk about longhouses, hopefully talk about the game of lacrosse.
Okay.
Maybe snow snake.
Is that Native American?
Lacrosse is a Native American game.
I had no idea.
Yes, absolutely.
Did you learn when you were on this show?
The medicine game, often played over days of time, over miles of land, often played as a medicine to heal someone who's sick. Lacrosse is a traditional Native American game played by many Native Americans, not just the Haudenosaunee, but yes.
I had no idea. Now, when you came in, she says, I brought this wampum belt. And I says, I don't think that looks much like a belt. But she's going to explain what the wampum belt is. And then she's brought some wonderful cultural items here, and we'll talk about those. And I love I don't want to call it a cane. What is it?
It is. It's a condolence cane.
Okay.
It's a specific, not a walking cane, but a condolence cane.
Okay, good.
So wampum belts were originally woven from quahog shells. Quahog shells have white
They're
parts
native,
and purple
yeah.
parts, and they would divide them and they would weave them into what we call a wampum belt. That wasn't worn as a belt. It was used as a mnemonic device by the people keeping the history. So just like when
Do they have a written language?
Not until the Jesuits imposed one upon them.
I
So
know.
not until after European contact.
Yeah.
It's all an oral tradition.
Yeah.
So someone would be going through the oral tradition, and just like we would put a bookmark in an important page, when something really important happened, they would weave it into a wampum belt. Now, this wampum belt is called the Iowenta belt. It shows the 5 nations, which were at one time warring. We can't see the whole belt because we used it as a traditional, non-traditional tablecloth here, but it shows the 5 nations being unified into a Confederacy of peace. And so when someone was going through the history, when something really important happened, they could take out that next belt, read the pattern, and say, okay, I remember, now this is what happens next.
So they went by images.
Yes, so the wampum belts were used as a mnemonic device. So we have one called the Degani Diahage Gaswenta, the two-row wampum, that shows the Europeans and the native people living side by side in peace. That one obviously comes much after this one, but those are probably the two most important. Now, this is not an official flag of the Haudenosaunee people, because in the Haudenosaunee culture, there is no voting. Everything is done by consensus, and there was not consensus.
Quakers too, right? Yeah.
There was not consensus on this flag, but if you go to a powwow, you'll see this flag flying. You'll see it on the Iroquois lacrosse team and a lot of sporting teams.
Colors?
Purple and white would be the original colors of that, again, that quahog shell. So out of what was available in the environment, and we don't have anything in the archaeological record to prove that wampum belts were made before quahog shell, but porcupine quills are also dark and light, so there's no reason why porcupine quills or possibly wood couldn't have been woven into belts before this, but it just doesn't survive the archaeological record because of the level of acidity in the soil of New York State.
It would have been.
So it's not, we don't know because we haven't found it.
I'd love to talk about the cane.
The condolence cane.
When she was telling us about it, I was just fascinated by it.
So the condolence cane is not used as a walking cane. The condolence cane is used to keep track of our condoled leaders, the Yolane. So in English we use the word chief. But when you think of chief, or when I think of chief, I think growing up in America you think of someone who's kind of top of the heap, buck stops here, I'm in charge. I imagine when your children playing that King of the Hill and put, the Yolane translates to he who is of the good mind. And traditionally a Yolane, a chief, someone who's of the good mind, they are putting all of the needs of the people before them. So when food is scarce, they're the last to eat. When wood is scarce, they're the last to heat their home. They make sure that everybody in the community is taken care of first. So the Yolane are kept track of by each peg. And when we have this on its side, we have the leaders of the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca nations,
so
keepers of
five
the
nations.
Eastern Door.
Tuscarora didn't make it.
This was done before the Tuscarora. And just like the wampum belt was, and we add them into the story, but we don't change the original.
You don't change the history.
Right, we don't. It's a living history, so culture changes, but the history doesn't change. So on this wampum belt, for example, I don't know if you can see, but way at the bottom, there's a little tiny square that juts off the end. That's actually the most important piece, some people say, of the whole belt. That little square, it's on both edges. There's one up here too.
Like the ampersands?
It's actually extending a hand.
That's what I mean.
It's extending a hand saying that we've joined in a Confederacy of peace, but peace doesn't have to end. So we're extending our hand that anyone else who wants to join in the Confederacy of peace and agree to settle their disputes with language and reason and not warfare can join. So that's what the Tuscarora do. When the Europeans come, they're feeling squeezed and they join this Confederacy.
Oh, I see. I understand that now.
So when I have this going east to west, it represents the Longhouse. I mentioned that Haudenosaunee stands for the people of the Longhouse, the literal housing, but it's also how they view their government as one big longhouse across New York State. So just like we don't fight with family within our house, we don't fight with family within the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. And when the condolence cane is standing...
So it's called a confederacy?
It's a confederacy.
Or a nation. How does nation and confederacy work?
This is actually like a United Nations.
Okay.
It's a confederacy of 6 individual nations that have joined together. And when we have the condolence cane standing upright, it represents the tree of peace. We say that when these 5 nations were brought together, a man named the peacemaker, he unified them, and he buried all of their weapons of war beneath a great white pine tree. When that white pine tree was uprooted, there was a river that was flowing underneath. So all of the men threw their weapons of war, and not only did it bury them, but because of that river, it carried them away. We stood that
What a
white
wonderful
pine.
image that is.
It is. We stood that white pine up again. And growing from each in the four directions is a white root of peace. Again, just like that extended hand.
Yes, yeah.
And you can follow that and join again the safety of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. And at the top, Ken Miracle has carved an eagle, because above that white pine, we always have an eagle flying. That eagle has very sharp eyesight and a very strong call. And his job is, whenever he sees any danger that might come to the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, he cries out. And in that way, all of the Haudenosaunee people and all of the supporters of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy are able to join together and bring peace and safety to the people again.
We have a few minutes. I'd like to talk about some of the other. I love your picture frame.
Sure. This is an example of raised beadwork. Raised beadwork was originally known around amongst the Haudenosaunee and especially the Tuscarora. Beads before European contact were made of natural items: wood, bone, stone, shell, clay.
The beadwork is just beautiful.
But after the Europeans come, they love trading for these beads, glass beads, originally from Czechoslovakia. And one of the most popular beads is this clear. And we think one of the reasons is that it can represent the Herkimer diamond.
Oh, yeah.
The Herkimer diamond is found only in Mohawk territory.
Yeah.
But it's so hard that we weren't able to drill through it. You could wear it in your medicine pouch, but you couldn't wear it as a bead. So once these clear beads come, it's popular from Czechoslovakia. It's possible that one of the reasons they were so sought after is that it was a Herkimer diamond that we could wear.
We have about a minute more.
And this is a cornhusk doll. Traditionally, cornhusk dolls are made without faces. We have a story about that. Everything in Haudenosaunee culture has
a storyteller. So if someone wants to have you come and talk,
everything has a song, a dance, and a story. Originally, the first music that we used was just the stomping of the foot. The second instrument that we believe we had was the bark rattle. After that, we had a horn rattle come into play. And now we also have the water drum. So those are our three main instruments.
Oh my gosh. Oh, you know, there is an Iroquois museum, and we will be having them on the show as well later on in the season when they have more of their events going on.
And also Ganetjahalege, small Mohawk community in Fonda. That's where I take my Mohawk language immersion class.
Good.
Wonderful place to learn about the culture.
Yeah, and I bought a beautiful necklace there once.
Oh,
in
wonderful.
That area.
Well, Nyawagoa, thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thank you, Stephanie, for just such a wonderful overview of the Iroquois Nation, or the
Iroquois Confederacy, Haudenosaunee people.
Haudenosaunee.
Haudenosaunee, yes, people. Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I look forward to your presentation on Sunday. Right, you're doing one on Sunday.
Yes, for SOS.
Yeah, right, good. So I'm going to be there for that too.